Hi, today is Friday, July 24th, 2026. I'm Cindy Allen, also known as the Taylor Swift of Trade. I'm CEO of Trade Force Multiplier, a global trade consultancy service that handles everything from those pesky 28s and 29s, requests for information and notices of action to complex trade strategies that you need to outline for your board in this enforcement-oriented trade environment. Welcome to Simply Trade Cindy's version, where I base an international trade update on a Taylor Swift song. It's brought to you in association with the Global Training Center. It's good to be with you after 2 weeks. And unlike my muse, Taylor Swift, I didn't take 2 weeks off to get married and go on a fancy honeymoon. I took time off to hang out with my 3 kids and play Gigi to my 4 grandkids. But it is really great to be back with everyone. Today's Taylor Swift song is Sad, Beautiful, Tragic. And I know there is a lot going on in trade. So much has happened just in the past week when I looked back on everything. At 12:01 this morning, Eastern Standard Time in the US, Section 122 ended. That was the 10% that was due on all goods coming into the United States, with some exceptions. And we have seen the implementation of Section 301 tariffs for lack of forced labor enforcement that the U.S. found was harm to the U.S. economy. So very interesting that a 301 section can be justified utilizing the lack of enforcement for another country of their own laws. So really interesting. Let's delve into the details here. This does cover all 60 countries. Some have 10%, some have 12.5%. Some include the MFN or most favored nation or normal duty rates within that 10% and within that 12.5%. But some countries have that just on top of the MFN or the normal duty rates. There are over 700 products or tariff numbers that have a general exemption. This means they don't have the Section 301 applied to them. And there are 3 criteria that they outlined in the executive order or the notice of action in the FRN notification. And that's raw materials for a domestic supply. So that would cause an issue with domestic either supply or manufacturing. Products that cause economic-wide impact. So this is seen to be the gas and oil exemptions that we saw, some of the food exemptions that would have a massive impact to the economy of the United States, or that can't be grown or produced in the United States. Now, this is similar to a former exemption that came under a lot of fire, that goods couldn't be produced in the United States. But we did see it for some exotic fruits, coffees, things like that. As an avid coffee drinker, I'm very happy that this will not cover coffee, unflavored coffee only, which I found really odd. But, we don't understand a lot of these actions. On top of those more than 700 product exemptions, there are hundreds of country-specific exemptions or use-specific exemptions. So it's going to be really complex to go through this and determine if the product applies or not. There are also Section 232 product exemptions. So if you have steel, aluminum, copper, those automotives, heavy-duty trucks, automotive, aerospace that are in the Section 232, you don't have to pay the 301 on top of that. So some good news there. Also carved out, some trade agreements are also exempt. I have to say this is one of the most complex trade remedy actions that I've seen rolled out. It's multiple layers. The notification itself was hundreds of pages, which everyone was reading because it came out at the end of the day yesterday and was in effect at midnight, 12:01 this morning. So a lot of us spent a lot of time reading through all of the exemptions, reading through the text of the Federal Register notice to make sure that we understood what applied and what didn't. And one of the things that I can tell you is that I do believe that some of the trade associations will come out with a spreadsheet or guide that will assist you as an importer, as a customs broker, in applying the correct amount of tariffs, because it's going to be very complex. There are A through O annexes on this. The first annex, of course, is those 700 plus exemptions that apply to every country. And then it goes into country specific exemptions. And each country is referred to a different exemption list in the B through O phase. Some of them are applicable to only some products, although the tariff rate may cover, that tariff number may cover more than one product. So I would carefully examine the tariff numbers, carefully examine the text for the country that you are buying those goods from to make sure that your product does or does not fall in a tariff exemption. I know that the programmers also spent a lot of time last night trying to program their systems to ensure that you're paying the right amount of duty and that that duty is accurately reflected. The information that was supplementally sent out after the Federal Register notice does give customs brokers advice on how to list each of these trade remedies, in what order, the tariff stacking, as we call it, where the duty rates for each of these should be applied so that we can prevent some issues that we're seeing in some of the IEEPA refund duties that are coming out, in that the tariffs were not stacked properly or that the tariff rate was not shown on the right tariff stacking level, or that it was lumped together inaccurately. And as I've said before, some of those IEEPA tariffs, when they came out, there was not specific guidance. So I commend CBP for giving guidance so that the implementation could be a little bit more smooth. The 301 is thought to fare better in the court challenges than the previous trade remedies. You know, we saw both Section 122 and the IEEPA tariffs be challenged in court. The 122 is still ongoing. We do know that there have been some court actions that have asked for the review of Section 232 as well. But previous 301 challenges in court have not been wholly successful. So this is seen to have a better legal standing. It does, Section 301 does give the president clear authority to actually assess tariffs. However, I think the lack of direct link to economic impacts in the United States from the foreign adoption of forced labor enforcement and the level of enforcement could be at play in a court challenge moving forward. Those of us in trade do expect this to be challenged like all the other tariffs, so stay tuned. This is a very litigious administration, and we do believe that this will spawn some court challenges in the future. It'll be interesting to see what industry steps up, what countries and companies step up to actually challenge us in court. I know it's also concerning that forced labor seems to have the same effect on 50 or more countries, and that they're 12.5%, on a smaller number of countries, they're 10%. And those aren't rated specific to the country's level of enforcement of forced labor. Specifically, they are just dumped into buckets. So I think that could be an issue. Very interesting, very long night for those of us in trade, advising our customers what's happening and how to go about understanding how that impacts the products that you're importing, and for customs brokers, all of your customers understanding where that impacts. If you are an importer and you're reaching out to your customs broker, just know that they got as much notice as you did to make all of the changes to identify all of the products that are going to be assessed this additional tariff, and that they are working as hard as they can to make sure, as well as the programmers. The programmers had less than 12 hours to actually implement these changes. The good thing is they seem to be tied to the tariff numbers, so it's a little bit easier change in that they can query that tariff number. But the application of your products is where some of that review really has to happen with the customs brokers. So give them some grace today. Also announced in the past week or two is the Section 338 tariffs on Canada of up to 50% on some Canadian products. Now that the U.S. has signaled that it did not want to renew USMCA and that 10-year clock has started, these 338s are hopefully going to be seen as a negotiation tool. That's when a lot of people are guessing that these are a negotiation tool, utilizing, tariffs to get some concessions from the Canadian government. The 338 tariffs on Canada are set to take effect in mid to late August, so there is time. That's why the timing seemed a little suspect and hopefully does not come into effect. However, many of us have second guessed the tariff assessment in the past, and we've seen wide scale tariff adoption go into place when the administration has not received the concessions that it's looking at. So we are seeing that these could take effect. So if you are in Canada, importing products from Canada on the northern border, you may want to take a look at those tariffs as well. I've been asked a lot what's happening with IEEPA tariffs. Those are continuing to flow a little bit slower because the pace at the Department of Treasury has slowed down a little bit. They wanted to get all of those that were close to liquidation out, and now we're seeing a normal pace of refunds coming through. I was asked recently if the companies that are receiving those IEEPA tariffs are refunding those to the end customers. We aren't seeing that in a wholesale environment. There are a couple of class action lawsuits underway to force the companies to do that. However, strictly looking at that from a customs law perspective, the importers are the right refund recipients. So what they do with that is up to them. We are seeing a lot of them just repurpose them for payments for the new tariffs that came into effect. This has been a daisy chain of tariffs. We had the IEEPA, we had 122, now we have 301, and in some cases we have 338. There are some exemption areas for that 301: textiles, agricultural, farm, oil and gas was also exempt, specifically, I think, to address some of the constraints that we're seeing because of the war in Iran and the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, and also the blockage of some movements within Saudi Arabia and other areas of shipping that are being constricted, including the Red Sea, where the Houthis continue to attack commercial vessels, I mean. So really, the bottom line is, we're seeing what was originally just 301 and now assessed at 232 and the 338. So the four good legally authorities that were granted to the administration, 122, 232, 301, and 338, have now been used. So no longer guessing if 338 was going to be used. We are seeing that come into effect. So to the song, Sad, Beautiful, Tragic from the Red album. This focuses on how, despite efforts, some relationships are just lost. The song opens with long handwritten note deep in your pocket, words how little they mean when you're a little too late. This is my ode to Canada, to USMCA, to a world of free and fair trade in that environment. My ode to an orderly passing of rollout of trade actions, to a sense that the application of these authorities have meaning as it is applied to trade and the economy of the United States. The song wraps up: distance, timing, breakdown, fighting. Silence, the train runs off its tracks. Kiss me, try to fix it. Could you just try to listen? Hang up, give up. For the life of us, we can't get back. We had a beautiful, magic love there. We had a sad, beautiful, tragic love affair. And now we are really seeing a new world in trade. And I hope to see you in that new world of trade next week. We'll talk to you then.